Hey, what's up, guys? It's Ezra. Welcome back to Big Time Eaters and welcome back to Big Time Recipes. Today, we are going to be cooking a version of Mapo Tofu, a Chinese dish originates in a shop with a Chinese grandma. She made this dish and utilizing tofu and Szechuan peppercorns, making a nummy and spicy dish that eventually everyone just started raving about and really liked. So she opened up a mini restaurant. Um, just for people to have that. And the name literally translates to, it's like grandma pock face, because her face was uneven, and that's what the tofu looks like if you look at a slab of tofu. So it's kind of a messed up name for what is actually a beautiful and very tasty dish. So I've got a wok over an induction burner here. I've got the induction burner set to a 6 out of 10, and I've got 2 tablespoons Szechuan peppercorns. So what we're going to do with our first tablespoon here is bloom the spice. So we're going to get that into our pan and allow it to heat up. I'm actually going to back the heat down a little bit. I think 6 is a little too high. So I've got my pan at a 5 out of 10 here, and I'm just going to swirl around my Szechuan peppercorns for probably about a minute. Just allow the flavors to develop before we get them back out into our ramekin and then into a mortar and pestle where we can crush it up. And as the aromas develop and start to turn golden brown, we can get it back into our ramekin and then over to our mortar and pestle. And then with our other tablespoon of peppercorns, we're going to get a high smoke point oil. So we're going to get that into our pan. And probably about 2 tablespoons, because we're going to be using this to cook the rest of our dish with that aromatic Szechuan peppercorn oil. So we want to get into that, allow those to fry a little bit, and infuse flavor into our oil. And already, guys, just these peppercorns are going to add so much flavor. So I highly recommend getting a hold of these if you plan on making this Mapo Tofu dish. And again, we don't need to leave it in here too long, about a minute. Just allow peppercorns to release their flavor. We can actually remove these peppercorns because we got what we want out of them. And just scoop the peppercorns out and leave our flavored oil in there. I bit into one of these and I literally numbed my whole mouth. So just fair warning. Okay, so we got our infused oil, and that pretty much wraps our preparation for all the other ingredients. So I'm going to quickly turn this down for a second so I can just talk you through everything that I've got on my table here. So traditionally, ground pork is what's used for the Mapo Tofu, but what I've got on hand are some ground beef and some chicken thigh that I ground up myself into kind of like a medium mince. What we're going to do with this chicken is add in a little bit of our cornstarch and then oyster sauce over here on the side. So we'll add about a tablespoon. This is about a pound and a half of chicken. So we're going to add about a tablespoon of cornstarch, and we're going to mix in some oyster sauce with that, and then give our chicken a mix. That's going to sort of act as a pseudo marinade, pseudo binder that will help our chicken remain juicy. So added about a tablespoon of oyster sauce in there. Then I'm just going to take a spoon and mix this up real quick. As far as my other ingredients go, I've got dark soy sauce. I'm also going to be utilizing this black bean garlic sauce. So this has fermented black beans in it. It's going to add another layer of savory flavor and bring out the real umami richness of the meats that we're adding in. I've also got 5 cloves of minced up garlic here and a chopped up bunch of scallions, as well as some chili oil, some of this nonami togarashi. It's a Japanese pepper blend. You don't have to add this stuff if you don't want it to be too spicy. And also I had some extra mushrooms on hand, so I'm going to add those in as well. I think it'll pair nicely when we serve this over rice. So that is our ingredients. Also, with those ingredients that I just showed you, we're going to be making this sauce. I prepared it in advance. I'll have the ingredient amounts listed somewhere right here. But essentially, it's about a cup of water, a tablespoon of oyster sauce, half a teaspoon of dark soy sauce that I've got here, 2 teaspoons of sugar, and then salt and pepper to taste. And while I'm mixing that, I realized I kind of forgot to mention the type of tofu we're using. So traditionally, I believe it's silken tofu, but I like my tofu to have a little bit of texture to it, so I'm using a medium firm tofu block here. Look at that. Break the... Bruh. All right, so this is what our chicken's going to look like after we mix it with that oyster sauce and cornstarch mixture. You can see it's kind of started to gum up a bit and kind of become more homogeneous. And that's good for us because we're going to be frying everything in oil. So it'll allow a little bit of a crust and things to form. It kind of sounds nice. I think I should call her up. Anyways, let's go ahead and get the cooking process started. I'm going to go ahead and bring my induction burner up to a 6 out of 10. Right up to that point where the oil will start to smoke a little bit. We're just going to let this come up to heat. But our oil's starting to get that smoke point. So I'm going to go ahead and get the chicken going. We're just going to briefly cook this, kind of brown it on the exterior, and then remove it back to the container before we finish it. So you give it a flip. After about 20-30 seconds, you can see that exterior has already got to the browning stage. So that's what we want. We just want a little bit of that browning on there, but we're not trying to fully cook this, as again, we are going to have to simmer things a little bit. So we're probably about 50% cooked here with the chicken, but I've got enough browning that I'm happy to remove it. You can see we got a nice golden brown exterior right there. So let's go ahead and get this chicken removed off into our bowl here, and then we'll get our ground beef browning. Let's go ahead and get our ground beef in. And I'm going to add a tiny bit more oil. As I can see, the chicken absorbed a lot of that aromatic oil that we got. I'm also going to, at this point, season up my beef with just some salt, black pepper, maybe half a teaspoon of this umami togarashi, just as another layer of flavoring here. And as you can tell, guys, we're doing a pretty protein heavy rendition of this. But if you're vegetarian, you don't have to add any meat to this. You can do just the tofu and just the mushrooms, or if you don't like mushrooms, just the tofu. But ultimately, you don't have to follow exactly the same guidelines and rules. It's just more taking techniques you can apply to your own home and your own flavor palette. So for me, I'm a pretty big guy. I like a lot of protein in my dishes, so I'm going with the mix of the ground beef and the mix of the chicken. So our ground meat is pretty much 70% of the way brown. So I'm going to go ahead and add that over the top of my chicken. I'm going to get our garlic and crushed up peppercorns going, as well as I'll take his time to cut up my tofu into cubes here. All right, guys, we're back. We've got our tofu sliced up now into some cubes. We also crushed up our peppercorns right here into a powder that we are going to add over the top as our numbing agent with this dish. But let's go ahead and cook our last component that we've decided to do today, and that being our mushrooms. And just allow these mushrooms partially cook before they simmer in our Mapo Tofu sauce. All right, at this point, tell Denzel to shut up and then put our mushrooms in before the house burns down. We're just gonna get a nice sear on these. As those mushrooms are cooking, let me go ahead and talk about our tofu. So we had to hit it with a 1-2 slice, that onigiri, that Zorro action from One Piece. We got it in cubes. And don't worry if it's not the most even cut, guys, because at the end of the day, it's all going over your rice on that spoon, in your mouth, boom, absolutely. You are your tofu technicians of your Mapo Tofu rendition. You know what I mean? Summoning my inner Chef John food wishes. You feel me? All right, let these cook down. Let the mushrooms water, moisture start to evaporate a little bit so that we can replace it with the Mapo Tofu flavor that we're about to build up. All right, guys? Got a nice little bit of that browning action that I wanted. Okay, so at this point, we're going to go ahead and get our mushrooms removed. So we're going to go in with the ground beef and the chicken here. All that flavored goodness. And we're going to let them hang out with each other. Let them get to know each other, all right? Just like your parents used to force you to hang out with the neighborhood kid, even though you don't necessarily know them very well, but you get to know them a little bit, and the relationship starts to develop, the flavors start to develop in the pan, and it just goes crazy, and you're like, amazing. Anyways, kind of unrelated. Let's go ahead and push these off to the side and get our garlic in, as well as some of our scallions. We're having a whole party in our pan here, in our wok. Get that off to the side, as well as some of our scallions. Probably about half at this point. We'll save the rest for garnish and simmering. So we're going to let this mix together. When that garlic aroma is starting to come out, it's a beautiful thing. It smells great. When things smell great, that's a sign that things are going to taste great, all right? We also want to get in our black bean garlic sauce. I've got that here. I'm going to go in with probably a tablespoon and a half of that. Actually, let's just go ahead and go 2 tablespoons and get that mixed in. And guys, once that cooks in, my gosh, you have no idea. That's the flavor right there. That's the goodness. That's what we need. That's the soul soothing power right there. We can also add in our chili oil. So I've got this lao gama fried chili and oil. So I like to taste the foods I eat. So I'm not going too crazy with the spices. But if you guys like spiciness, you know, you can do that. But I'm going to go with that's probably about a tablespoon, half a tablespoon, right over the top. And mix that in. Okay? Okay. Guys, we've already got layers on layers of amazing flavor right here. Okay? So what do? We're going to add another one.
Another one.
We got our stir fry sauce, about a cup of water. Might need a little bit more. Mix in dark soy sauce for that color and flavor, as well as oyster sauce and sugar for a balance. You know, we're building this harmony, this symphony of flavors, and we need everything to do its part. So I'm gonna go ahead and add this in. That's gonna halt the cooking process so nothing gets too extra crazy on the bottom. At this point, we can also add in our mushrooms. Allow those in. Welcome them to the party. And I think at this point, guys, I'm gonna add in a touch more water, just because we did opt for a little more protein than you usually would. Probably add in about another cup of water there and allow things to simmer. We are ready to add in the main component of this dish. The ingredient, the namesake of this dish, the tofu. So I've got my burner on a 5 out of 10. I want to bring this up to a simmer, so a light bubble, so that the tofu and everything can start to infuse and not get confused, and spread it around. Can't have any inequality of tofu in this dish. So once I get these last little pieces added on, I'm gonna go ahead and do a temp check. So we want it right about there. So I'm just gonna keep it here and then let things kind of simmer and meld together. This has been simmering for a few minutes. We've cleaned up our area a little bit, but at this point I do want to add in some more scallions over the top. Scallions over the top, baby. And we're gonna reserve some for when we plate, but I'm gonna add the majority of them right now. Another layer, guys, another layer. Sesame oil, baby. You see that right there? When you look at the Asian store, you look for this bottle, this is the truth right here. This is the real deal, sesame oil. Okay? So we're gonna go in with maybe 2 teaspoons over the top. Just be careful with the pour. This can come out pretty rapidly, and this is pretty strongly aromatic stuff. So we're gonna let this simmer for a few more minutes, and then we will be ready to serve it over some freshly cooked rice. Freshly cooked, emphasis on the freshly. We're back, almost done, almost finished, all right? So what we're gonna add in now, before I wreck the kitchen, is our cornstarch slurry, just over the top. Because if you don't add this in, guys, you basically got soup, okay? But we want something that's gonna be able to lay over our rice and bind to it. So we're gonna mix that in, being careful of our little chunks of tofu. We don't want them to be damaged in the process, okay? We do not want our tofu to be damaged in the process, transportation of cornstarch, all right? Okay, so we got our cornstarch going in here. As it comes up to temp, it's going to start to thicken. This is like the peanut butter and jelly of rice right now, okay, guys? Like this is serious stuff, okay? Those of you that don't know Asian cooking, man, Chinese cooking specifically, rice is a must, okay? All right, guys, we're back. You can see our Mapo Tofu, after adding in that cornstarch slurry, it started to turn into more of a sauce-like topping. So we're gonna get every layer of goodness, guys. Look at that. We're gonna serve it up on our bowl, right over the top. We're gonna get every element incorporated into our bowl here. A little bit more scallions over the top. The final component is a little bit of our numbing agent, our Szechuan peppercorn that we toasted, okay? Over the top. Look at the jiggle of the tofu, man. That tofu. Okay. Let's give it a taste. Mapo tofu with 2 proteins and some mushrooms, topped off with our scallions, some of that nanami togarashi, that Szechuan peppercorn. This is incredible. This is a beautiful moment. This is a symphony, a harmony, a balance of flavors. So let's get it on a spoon and get it to reviewing. So we get a little bit of everything. Got to get that portion of tofu right there. Position that right over the top. Bite for you. Bite for you. A big bite for me. We definitely built everything up from the bottom to the top. All right, there's a lot of preparation beforehand going into this dish. But once you got it all prepped, it really comes together pretty quickly. So you got that chicken, that ground beef playing together really nicely with the assembled umami, funky, rich flavors and spiciness all playing together just perfect over that white rice. I got to get another bite. I'm going to get a mushroom in this bite. And then we'll have the Zell tester come in.
Finish him!
That is the bomb.com. There's a kick, lots of flavors. That peppercorn, you definitely can taste it. It's really good. And this is so good, I'm going to keep it all. And if Ezra tries to stop me, I'm going to beat his ass.